Imagine waking up one morning in your cozy cave dwelling, making some breakfast over a small fire, and thinking to yourself, I wonder what I'm gonna do with my day. You could spend some time playing with your spear, maybe chase some wild dogs, or, perhaps you will take a walk on the wild side and find a saber-toothed tiger to wrestle. Life as a Neanderthal was pretty great, all things considered. But there was a big problem lurking around the corner for our hairy hominid heroes. They were going extinct, and we are totally to blame. It's us versus them, the rise of modern humans versus the mighty but ultimately inferior Neanderthals. Let's get into it. To understand this sorry tale of hominid hubris, let's first go back to the beginning, or at least to the prehistory of France about 500,000 years ago. That's when Neanderthals started making regular appearances in the fossil record. They got their name from the Neander Valley in Germany, where one of the first Neanderthal skeletons was found in 1856. But they were also found in France, Spain, Italy, the Near East, and more. These days, the best guess among experts is that Neanderthals arose in Europe and then migrated east. Despite being called Neanderthals, these proto-humans weren't actually Neander Valley Germans, but rather Homo like the extinct species, Homo erectus, Homo sapiens, and Homo habilis before them. They were an early relative of modern humans who had learned to use tools and make weapons. Unlike those earlier species, though, Neanderthals were definitely smart enough to make and use spears and, at least in some cases, bury their dead. However, like those earlier species, they were still very much an ape-like subspecies with heavy brow ridges, prominent noses, and lots of body hair. If you encountered one on a dark night in the woods, you might mistake them for a big hairy bear. The story goes that somewhere between 400,000 and 45,000 years ago, Homo sapiens arose in Africa and eventually migrated north and east, taking our first tentative steps into Europe about 45,000 years ago. We quickly found ourselves in competition with the dominant hominid species, the Neanderthals. They occupied a large swath of territory across Europe and Western Asia, and they were bigger and stronger than us, so we should have lost this evolutionary game of chicken almost immediately, right? Well, no. What happened next has been the source of much scientific debate, but recent evidence suggests that Neanderthals and modern humans interbred, meaning that we totally did not wipe them out, but we did doom them, possibly because of how our brains worked differently. While Neanderthals were perfectly suited to life in Europe's cold, dry climate, Homo sapiens had evolved in Africa's warmer, sunnier climate. We'd gotten used to less severe weather, and likely preferred living in places where plants grew more readily, which meant that humans tended to settle along coastlines and river valleys where the land was more hospitable. That preference gave us an edge when it came to food. We could catch fish, gather shellfish, and farm crops along those bountiful waterways, while Neanderthals found fewer such resources in their mountainous, forested homes. But it may have also given us a brain boost. As anthropologist Peter Gray of Boston University puts it, Neanderthals probably had an evolutionary advantage in colder climates, simply because they were bigger and stronger than modern humans. But the advantages that modern humans had in, say, the Near East and coastal areas were sufficient for our species to outcompete them everywhere else. In other words, the environment favored us over the Neanderthals, and not just because of our farming communities. Our brains required fewer calories to run than theirs, so we could get all the food we needed without having to eat as much. And that meant we could adapt to living in new environments more food variety meant more nutrients and more cognitive fuel for our growing brains. Some scientists even think that our ability to cooperate in larger groups may have been key. After all, humans can form social groups of up to several thousand individuals, whereas the maximum size of a Neanderthal social group was probably closer to 200. Groups that size require more complex social structures, which means the need for advanced language skills, planning abilities, and a host of other higher-order functions that may have helped us thrive in new environments, while the Neanderthal stayed put. We're not entirely sure what caused their extinction, but we do know that it wasn't just one thing. It was likely a combination of our outcompeting them for resources, killing them directly, and even breeding with them. Whatever the cause, by 40,000 years ago, all of the Neanderthal fossils we've found so far are of young individuals, suggesting that something had decimated their population, leaving few adults behind to pass on their genes. The good news is that thanks to the work of Louis Leakey, Mary Leakey, and other famous paleontologists, we've learned that the Neanderthals aren't as extinct as we once thought. As it turns out, many of us have a little bit of Neanderthal DNA in our own genome. We didn't win the evolutionary game of chicken, But we did end up taking some of the other players' stuff, including bits of their genome. Maybe we should thank them for that. Or maybe we should feel bad that their genetic contribution to our species is a sort of trophy, a souvenir from a long extinct people whose remains we pillaged in our quest for dominance.